Hello class, in this skill builder video we're going to talk about how to utilize text variables. Now in previous lessons in this class we have discussed how to set up your running headers or dynamic content in master pages, things like folios or page numbers. But one of the things that we were using up until this point was static content for our running headers. So for instance the chapter number. But today I'm going to show you how we can combine what we already know about paragraph styles with a topic called text variables to create dynamic running headers. So to get us started, I have come here to Project Gutenberg and I'm going to find a book. Let's go to the frequently downloaded section. I'm going to find a book here to use. And oh, you know what, here, number 14, Adventures of Tom Sawyer. That'll work. So I'll go ahead and click on that and I will go ahead and grab the plain text file. Now, for this particular assignment, I only really need, a couple of chapters worth of content. So I'm going to scroll down until I get, let's see if there's an introduction or a preface on this book. There is a preface, but you know what? I'll start here on chapter 1. So I'm going to click once before the word chapter. Come on down here. Keep scrolling. It's a long chapter. So there's chapter 2. Looks like these are Roman numerals. So we'll go to chapter 2. So I'm going to hold the shift key down, click one more time at the end of chapter 2, copy that, and let's go ahead and make a new document. Now, I'm going to put this in a text file, but I want to make sure that it is a plain text file. There we go. So now I have 2 chapters of text, chapter 1 and chapter 2. We'll go ahead and get rid of that, and I'll do the rest of my work here in InDesign. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and create a new document, and for this one I will do one that is, we'll do a traditional, actually you know what, I'll just use letter half. That'll be a little bit easier. As far as the margins are concerned, I'll use kind of a traditional set of margins where again the outside margins or the 4 edges are twice the spine. So the inside margins are 3 picas, I'll make the outside 6. Oops, let me unlock that. There we go. The top I'll leave at 3 picas, the bottom I'll also double at 6. So I've got double margins on the bottom and the outside. Everything looks good. I'm not going to worry too much about bleed. Do want to make sure I have facing pages. Okay, so I'll go ahead and create that document. There we go. And now I want to go ahead and put the content into my document. So I'm going to go up to File, Place, and I'll use AutoFlow to place that document, which I don't think I saved yet. So let me save that. We'll save that to the desktop as Tom. I'll just call it Tom. There we go. There it is. I'll go ahead and select that. I will show my import options. And remember here, I want to go ahead and remove my carriage returns. Click OK, and I now have a preloaded cursor. So I'm going to hold Shift to include my autoflow. Click once, and I now have 14 pages. Okay. So I've got that set up. The next step, as you've been working on this, was to create paragraph styles. And so I may want to have a paragraph style for the chapter title and a paragraph style for the main body of my paragraphs. So in this case, I'm going to create both by example. So let's go ahead and I'm going to quadruple click there on chapter 1, and I'm going to style that the way that I want it. So maybe I want it to be 24 points. Let me change the font to something a little bit better. Let's see, we'll use function for this. How about that? There we go. Set up maybe a little space after that. Let's do 36 points for space after. That looks fine. And let's just assume that is going to be my style for my chapter. As far as the individual paragraphs, so I'm going to select a paragraph here. And for this one, I'll go ahead and leave it as Minion Pro, but I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. So I'll make this 10-point font, and I'll set the leading to 14. That looks decent. And we'll do a space after, so we'll do a modern typesetting for this. I'll also set that to the leading at 14. There we go. And that's going to be my paragraph style for my body paragraph. Now, I have created these as examples. So now I've got to set them up as my paragraph styles. So again, quadruple click my chapter title, and now I'm going to go into my paragraph style settings. So Windows, Styles, Paragraph Styles. And from here, now that I have that selected, I'm just going to simply click to create a new style. It'll copy every single formatting that I've applied to what I have selected and create paragraph style 1. I'm going to double click on that, and we'll rename this chapter title or chapter number, whatever you want to call it. And you can see here that it has the information. It's going to be function, bold, 24 point size, and the space after is going to be equal to 3 picas. That looks good. I'll click OK. I'll do the same thing for the body paragraph. There we go. That's selected. Create a new style and rename this one. I'll call this one body paragraph. Okay. Now I have my 2 styles. And of course from here, I could go ahead and select all of the paragraphs in chapter 1. So let's see, where is chapter 2? Let's find chapter 2. Where did it go? Past it. Move this out of the way so I can see it. There it is, chapter 2. So I'm going to select all those paragraphs, apply the body paragraph style to that. That looks good. Click here, apply my chapter title. And of course, if I need this to go to another page, I can add a break character. And again, select the rest of the paragraphs, add body paragraph, so on and so forth. I know I have overset text. We're not really going to worry about that for this particular demonstration. The point is I now have a formatted document with 2 paragraph styles. Now, it's important that we use paragraph styles for a number of things. Obviously, it makes our layout more efficient, but the second reason is paragraph styles are handled very specifically in InDesign. InDesign actually knows what text has a paragraph style applied to it. In fact, as we went through and we talked about paragraph styles, you know that if I were to go in here into the paragraph style settings and make a change, so for instance, if I change chapter title, instead of it being 24 points in size, maybe I make it 32 points in size, it will automatically update every single chapter title that has that paragraph style applied to it. So in that case, InDesign is remembering each piece of text that actually has the style applied to it. And we're going to use that to our advantage to set up dynamic running headers. So how do we do this? Well, in previous lessons, when we set up our running headers, we use the master pages. And there's no exception here. We're going to use our master pages to do the same thing for this lesson. But here is a slight difference. In the past, you were creating your running headers for the chapter numbers statically, which meant we had to have a set of master pages for each individual chapter. That's not a very efficient way of doing things. So instead, I'm going to edit my master page, and we're going to set this up with dynamic content. We're going to use page numbers, and we're going to use the current page number to set a dynamic page number on each page in our layout. We are going to set one piece of static information, which will just be the name of the book. But when we go to set the running header for the chapter number, that's where things are going to change. So how do we do this? Well, first, let's go ahead and set up what we already know, which are the page numbers. So I'm going to create a text frame over here in the bottom left-hand corner, and I'm going to go up to my type menu and go down to special character, markers, current page number. Okay, so far this is all pretty simple. I'm going to do some things to this. So maybe I'll make this bold. I will center align it and bring up my text frame options, which again, Command or Control B, or under Object, you can find your text frame options are right there. And what I'm going to do for this frame is I'm going to vertically justify the content right here in the center. Okay, so with that page number done, I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate that. So copy paste or just hold the Option key as you drag. Either way works. Now I have 2 page numbers on either side. And of course I can go to any one of my content pages and you can see the page numbers show up there. Okay, so that's good. Let's handle the static content while we're at it as well. And in this case, let's say that we want the name of the book on a left-facing page and the chapter number on a right-facing page. Well, I would do the same thing like I did before. I'm going to start with the static content. So I'm going to create a text frame here down in the bottom in the foot margin or the bottom margin. And this is going to be, what was it, Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Okay. And again, I'm going to go ahead and vertically justify that. There we are. And I'll just leave this as just Minion Pro regular 12 points. We'll just leave it as that. That will be our formatting for our running headers, just to make things easier. All right, so now that's static content. That's content that does not change. So now every left-facing page should have Adventures of Tom Sawyer on it. Okay, so our master pages are working, right? That's good. And this content can be static because hopefully the name of your book does not change from chapter to chapter. That would be interesting, but that's probably not going to be the case. So we're going to go ahead and leave it as static content, but the chapter number will change from chapter to chapter. So what do we do here? Well, in this case, we want to apply dynamic content. Now remember, dynamic content is content that InDesign manages and InDesign automatically updates. The page numbers here are an example of that. InDesign knows which page those page numbers are showing up on and replaces the A here with whatever the number happens to be. So if I'm on page 7, it becomes a 7. If I'm on page 133, it becomes 133. One of the other aspects of dynamic content is something called a text variable. And a text variable is information that you can add to your document that may update or change. Things can be like, when was the last time the document was saved? When was the last time it was updated? What was the date it was created? How many pages are in the document? There's a lot of different things you can do with text variables, but one of the really cool things you can do with text variables is you can tie the content that InDesign displays to a paragraph style. And here's what I mean by this. We have a paragraph style that is styling a very specific piece of text. In this case, the chapter title. That text is chapter 1, both of these words. So chapter and the Roman numeral I for 1. We want this content to actually show up down here in the bottom as a running header. And when we get to chapter 2, wherever chapter 2 was, missed it, there it is. When we get to chapter 2, we want that to show up here until we get to chapter 3 and so on and so forth. Well, because InDesign handles and understands which text has a paragraph style applied to it, it also understands what the text is. Here's what I mean by this. InDesign not only knows that this paragraph has this particular paragraph style applied to it, but it also knows that that paragraph has the word chapter 2. And because it knows that, we can use that to our advantage by setting that up as a text variable. So I'm going to create another text frame, this time on my right-facing page, and this will hold my running header that will say chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. I'll go ahead and right align that and vertically align. There it is. So it will show up here. So what I want it to say is something like this, right? I want it to look like that. But how do we get that to work? I need to insert a text variable here. Now, if I go under type and I go under special character or white space or break character, you're not going to find text variables there. Text variables are actually found a little bit higher up in the menu right here. And you have a couple of options. You can define your own text variables, or you can insert one that is currently predefined. And Eagle Eye viewers may have automatically seen at the very bottom of this list is something called a running header. Now, this is a default running header that InDesign has set up. We're not going to use that one. We're actually going to modify our own. But if you look at this, here are some of the things that you can actually do. And yes, there is one that says chapter number, but that doesn't do what you think it does. We're going to get into that a little bit later when we talk about what's called the book panel. So just file that one away for later on. I know it looks tempting, but that's not the one we're going to use today. But here are some of the other things. If I put creation date, it will actually fill that with the date that this was created. If I were to put any other text variable, it will display that information as well. So for instance, what do we have here just by default? We have the name of the file, so whatever you have it saved as. So if I have this saved as tomsawyer.indd, that's what's actually going to be used. An image name. I can actually tie that to a very specific image that I have in my layout. The last page number. Now, why would you want to use that? Well, you may see in certain documents at the very bottom, the page number may say something like page 10 of 33. Well, that's how they get that. That of 33 would be the last page number. The modification date, the last time it was updated, the last time it was exported. So there are a lot of things that you can do with text variables, including we can define our own text variables. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to create a brand new text variable, and I'm going to call this, I'll call this Sawyer running header. Just whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter. The type that I want is going to be a running header, but if you look here, you have two different kinds. You have a running header based on a character style and a running header based on a paragraph style. Now again, the idea here is that we want to tell InDesign to look for text that has a specific style applied to it and use the actual copy, the actual text itself, as the value for the variable. So in our case, I'm going to choose paragraph style because that's what I've applied to my chapter titles. Then it wants to know what style you want to use. So in this case, I'm going to use the chapter title style. So I'm going to tell InDesign, I want you to look throughout the document for the chapter title style. The first time you find it on the page, I want to go ahead and we're going to replace this variable with that value. So in this case, when it finds the first instance, the text says chapter 1. So it's going to replace this value with the text chapter 1. So if I click OK, I'm going to go ahead and insert that down here at the bottom. There it is. And now, if I come back here, notice it says chapter 1. Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Chapter 2, and so on and so forth. So you see, automatically, I was able to update and create a dynamic heading that allowed me to take a piece of text that I have styled using a paragraph style, and whatever that text is, I automatically apply it to my running header. Now, in this case, one of the formatting issues here is that by default, this book has uppercase titles. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want them to be a different case altogether. Can I make that change? Well, sure, you could do that. In fact, if I go back to my running header here and go back out to type, go to text variables and go back to define, you'll find that Sawyer running header that we created was right here. And if I double click on that, you can actually change the case to uppercase, lowercase, title case, sentence case. You can do that. Or you can even delete end punctuation. There are some books out there that it says chapter 1 and then they put a period at the end. Well, you may not want that in your running header, so you can choose to remove that end punctuation. There's a lot of things that you can do. Now, in this particular case, I'm using a document that's using Roman numerals. So the problem with using change case in this instance is that if I change the case, when I get to chapter 2, and if I change it to say title case, which means that each word is capitalized, I will get a capital C and a lowercase chapter, right? But when you start dealing with your Roman numerals, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, the first letter for that Roman numeral will be capital, the rest of them will be lowercase. That looks a little odd. We'll talk a little bit later about how you can kind of work around these sort of issues. But for right now, play around with some of these text variables. This is a fantastic way of kind of combining what we know using styles and applying that style using a text variable. So things are starting to come together here. They're starting to fit together. It's like a piece of a puzzle. Everything kind of stems again from your typesetting, how you're going to set up your typesetting, using styles to efficiently lay out your book, and now utilizing those styles, we're able to actually handle dynamic content across our entire layout. So there you go, text variables. If you have any questions, email me. Until then, see you next time.